So this topic is a little bit difficult one to touch. It's a hot potato. And I just want to preface it by take everything in context. If you've been here and you've listened to the other presentations and so on, this is just flowing and continuing from that because we've got principles that we have been learning about. And we're going to look at addressing this topic in the context of those principles. And so we are going to look at the Adventist Church position on vaccination. Right? And this is it. It comes directly from the Adventist website guidelines on immunization. It says the Seventh-day Adventist Church places strong emphasis on health and well-being. The Adventist health emphasis is based on biblical revelation, the inspired writing of Ellen G. White, co-founder of the church, and on peer-reviewed scientific literature. As such, we encourage responsible immunization and vaccination, and have no religious or faith-based reason not to encourage our adherents to responsibly participate in protective and preventive immunization programs. Okay. So that's part of the statement. The statement goes on to say, we value the health and safety of the population, which includes the maintenance of herd immunity. We are not the conscience of the individual church member and recognize individual choices. These are exercised by the individual. The choice not to be immunized is not and should not be seen as the dogma nor the doctrine of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So we want to look at this statement a little bit within the context of the history of the Adventist Church's understanding of this topic. So we want to look at a historical survey. Now, I don't want to get into a position where I want anybody to think that those that have been involved in drafting this are evil or anything of that nature. No, a number of them are my friends, and I respect them. They have a lot of wisdom and a lot of experience, and and a lot of time that they have spent, and are under much pressures, lots of travel, lots of speaking, lots of other things of that nature, and I just simply see a different perspective, and I think it's beneficial. I think it's helpful for us to be able to explore different perspectives together as a people, so that we can evaluate, and we can evaluate especially within the context of Scripture and what God has given to us. So if we look at Adventist publications on vaccination, here we start in 1868. This is Dr. Trall, and he said, we do not deal in the article, referring to vaccination, said we neither vaccinate children nor furnish the virus for others to do so. We are as much opposed to viruses and vaccines as we are to drugs and medicines. If people must be sick, they had better have it the natural way. All right, so this is a thought or position back in the 1860s. Of course, it's quite interesting. They tie the response to viruses and vaccines to drugs and medicines. Right? Well, we go to 1869. Again, this is the editorial committee of the health reformer. We don't know exactly who all were the personnel that were involved in this, and this was on the article called Vaccination. And this editorial committee stated, as we are opposed to curing primary diseases by producing drug diseases, so we cannot see the propriety of curing or preventing contagious or infectious diseases by inoculating the system with venoms and viruses. So again, this is the editorial committee for the Health Reformer, which was the church's official health magazine back in that day. We fast forward a few years to 1872. Now James White is the editor of the Health Reformer. And here is Dr. Trall again, who is writing. He says, I do not believe in vaccination. I never practice it. My children, now adults, have never been vaccinated. They have been many times in the same house with smallpox patients, but have never had the disease. I am of the opinion that they never will, for they live preventively. One thing, however, is perfectly certain. If one keeps his blood reasonably pure, the smallpox will get the worst of it if it attacks him. I like his humor. 1873, the next year, again, James White is still the editor, and this is Dr. Troll as well. Nothing is more delusive than statistics. I think they realized that back in those days. It's true today as well. It is a common saying that figures cannot lie, but unless they are normally arranged and properly interpreted, they do lie, and that continually. And of all the false figures that ever muddled the human mind, none was ever more fallacious than in reference to vaccination and smallpox. So there was even controversy going on back in the 1870s about data related to contagious diseases, vaccination of those diseases, and whether there was really any effect associated with it. And so this is not a new controversy. This is not a new concept. This is something that's been going on for a long time, right? Long time. 1877, I should say. And this is the health reformer. Now we're looking at John Harvey Kellogg under the title Smallpox and Vaccination. He said, we do not wish to be understood as advocating vaccination. Right? We don't want to be under that position. We only admit the possibility of its utility as a protective means among people whose dietetic and other habits cannot be controlled. In other words, you've got people that aren't going to eat well, they're not going to live well, and in that situation, maybe, it's the possibility, maybe vaccination might have some preventive measures for them. Personally, we should never think of resorting to it. We have found rigid hygienic living as a perfect protection while visiting the most aggravated cases of disease in New York City, not suffering the slightest symptoms of it, though frequently and thoroughly exposed. And I'll tell you what they did not do in those days. They didn't wear masks. They didn't wear gloves. It was just, person to person, right, when you interacted. I mean, surgery in those days was not done with a mask. And it was not done with gloves. You washed your hands and you went in and you did surgery. Right? You see pictures back in those days, and everybody's standing around in the surgical suites. It wasn't until later that really came in the United States. 1882, and this is still Kellogg. Almost every mail brings us this question, and to answer it fully, we publish this month an article on smallpox in which the subject is treated at length. There is no doubt that vaccination is a great protection against smallpox. So we see time is progressing, and our position in relation to vaccination seems to be progressing a little bit as well. In which the subject, there's no doubt that vaccination is a great protection against smallpox, and it is questionable whether serious results often follow the introduction of the bovine or cow virus into the human system, though it cannot be denied that such is sometimes the case. So even if you're using cow serum or cow virus or whatever, then you still have bad things in certain cases. But he goes on to say humanized virus, meaning that you get the fluid from another human, should never be employed. It is settled beyond question that the old method of vaccination is dangerous in a high degree. Only virus taken from a calf should be employed, and care should be taken to prevent the introduction of septic matter into the system. We have known cases of marked blood poisoning to be produced by vaccination, even when ordinary care was taken. Right, so there are risks associated with it. And now let me give you an idea of how vaccination happened back in those old days. Back when we're talking about vaccination in the earlier days, in the trawl days, back in the 1860s and so on, vaccination was taking the pus from an infected individual that had smallpox and taking that pus and then excoriating an individual with that pus-laden sharp object, or injecting it or putting it under the skin or poking them with that thing in order to then inoculate them with that, that pus. Well, pus is not just the product that was there. It's somebody else's white blood cells. It's somebody else's stuff as well. And so it was not infrequent that individuals developed great abscesses on their arms. And sometimes you had individuals that lost their entire arm because of the infection that developed in the area where they did that. Well, another form of vaccination was live vaccination or arm-to-arm vaccination, where you would take an individual that was vaccinated and then started developing this pussy reaction associated to the vaccine, and then you would take another child or somebody and you would excoriate the skin so that it's broken open and maybe bleeding a little bit, and you put one arm next to the next arm. And right? And so that was vaccination, right? And that's the human, and then they figured out that they could get lymph fluid from an individual and suck out the lymph fluid and then use that and inject it into an individual. And they basically figured out that if you use it from humans, things don't work very well. If you use it from cows, it actually does a little bit better. You don't have such severe or extreme reactions to it. Going on to 1882, says, there are those who think that the time will come when nearly all diseases may be prevented by this plan, meaning vaccination. You think we're there? There are those who think that the time will come when nearly all diseases may be prevented by this plan. We hope we may never live to see the day when it will be considered the duty of every man to see that his children have all been properly vaccinated for each one of the various dangerous maladies which afflict the race. Such a course of vaccination, repeated as often as would be necessary to ensure safety every time a new epidemic made its appearance, would occupy a good share of one's lifetime. Well, views from 1882. Well, we go on to 1883. Again, this is still Kellogg. We are perhaps not prepared to take quite as strong ground in opposition to vaccination as a sanitary measure. So, our position's a little waning a little bit. However, we are utterly opposed to a compulsory vaccination as the most radical anti-vaccinationists could wish us to be. All right, so we're completely against compulsory vaccination. Avoidance of the cause of disease is clearly the most rational method of combating all human maladies. But we think the evidence is pretty clear that vaccination will prevent smallpox, and on this account, under certain circumstances, is preferable to allowing the disease to prevail without restriction. If we find reason for changing our views with reference to it, our correspondent with our readers will hear from us. All right, so we're starting to hear, time is progressing. We're starting to hear the messages. 1891, so we fast forward a little bit. Here's Kellogg in 1891. Ordinary vaccination frequently produces blood poisoning. In fact, a mild form of blood poisoning usually accompanies vaccination, as indicated by the great swelling of the part vaccinated, the enlargement of the glands in the neighborhood, severe pain, chills, and fever, and not infrequently formation of huge abscesses. Death sometimes occurs from vaccination through this cause. So again, this is not new territory. I've been here before. And here's Kellogg again, 1899, and this is the Daily Bulletin of the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventist, 8, number 5, February 20, 1899. It says, just as soon as smallpox gets into a community, what do the doctors do? They say everybody has to be vaccinated. Over in India, they vaccinate from arm to arm, that we talked about, Got somebody, got the pus and everything, get the other one, excoriate, and then do the arm-to-arm method, right? And people get leprosy and consumption, which is tuberculosis, through it. In this country, that method is not tolerated. You would not allow your children to be vaccinated from your neighbor's child's arm, but you allow them to be vaccinated from a calf because the calf has a great deal better blood than your neighbor's child has. You are afraid of your neighbor, and you have reason to be afraid of him. In India, not long ago, there was a case where 160 students in a school were vaccinated from arm to arm, and 60 of those boys and girls came down with leprosy in 3 years. Think of that. You see, vaccination is not a thing that is entirely safe. But there is some reason in it. Right? But if you are vaccinated from a calf that has tuberculosis, then you get consumption. Tuberculosis. So you see, that is not altogether safe. I believe there is something better on principle than that, and I am going to try to show you some disease with disease, and the man who is vaccinated is a little lower in vitality after he has been vaccinated than before. Now, there's an interesting observation. The one that's vaccinated is a little bit less in vitality than he was before. It's like a boy who becomes immune to the use of tobacco. At first, it makes him sick, but afterward he becomes used to it and it does not affect him. Yet it is doing the boy harm all the time. It is thought by some scientists that the time will soon come when vaccination will be employed for all maladies on the earth. It has been said by Dr. Lancaster in London that the time will come when a young man taking the course of medical school would, before he finished, be vaccinated for all diseases that were prevalent in the country. I do not think there would be very much left of that man after he had gone through all of that. It has been proved that when a man has had smallpox or the smallpox vaccine, he is more subject to consumption than before, or tuberculosis. This method of fighting disease with disease is the human way of meeting disease, just as we fight fire with fire. But God has given us a truth that has in it power to lift a man above the power of disease. He has given us principles which, if we obey and follow, will change our bodies so that we shall not have to be vaccinated. That will lift the body above the power of disease and above the power of sin, for sin and disease go along together. Disease is the consequence of sin, and sin induces a moral disease. He had some interesting insights. We move on. This is Dr. Hitt, 1899. This is September of 1899. He says, another great means of spreading the infection of leprosy, in my mind, is the method of vaccination. They use human lymph to vaccinate their children, and in this way, many of them take leprosy and other diseases. An instance is recorded in which 60 children out of 150 who were vaccinated in one district had leprosy within 2 years. I sent a circular to a number of physicians asking them to give me all of the information they could in regard to the number of cases treated in this way throughout their districts, and the results they reported were something awful. Many of them told me of the children in their districts who had taken the leprosy by being vaccinated with human lymph. There were 6 million children vaccinated there last year. And if you had a case history of 60 out of 150 or 50 out of 160 that developed leprosy, and now you have 6 million that are vaccinated, he goes on to say, and none but God can tell how many of them will fall victim to the disease from this cause alone. This is E.J. Wagner of the Jones and Wagner variety. Said at a recent health congress in Blackpool, a paper was read by Dr. Adler, chief rabbi of London, on the antiquity of sanitation, reference, of course, being made to the regulations found in the book of Moses. Those rules were given by the Lord himself, and when followed, produced the healthiest people that ever lived. Let it be noted, however, that inoculation was not included in the list of preventatives of disease. Perfect cleanliness within as well as without the body is the sum of the whole matter. Clean food, pure water, fresh air, muscular exercise, and a clean conscience will ward off any plague known. It may be said that vaccination and inoculation have saved many lives. No doubt they have served a purpose, and yet will do so among people who find that course easier than keeping themselves thoroughly clean. But to fill one's body with death as a means of warding off death is unscriptural and unscientific. I don't think E.J. Wagner would be very popular today. 1902, vaccination. This is, Kellogg again. Vaccination at its best is inoculation of the body with toxic elements. Unless the nicest care is taken in the preparation of the vaccine material and in its application, blood poisoning may occur in any case. Vaccine points are often infected with germs capable of producing the most dangerous forms of blood poisoning, and not infrequently the operation of vaccination is performed without any proper attention to asepsis. The real wonder is that immediate serious results are not more often seen. 1903, this is Dr. Kress on an article called Smallpox, How to Prevent It. In 1871, 35 years after the passing of the Persian Act, and this was mandatory vaccination of the population in Persia, a communist bloc at the time, and people didn't have the freedom to choose. A terrible epidemic passed all over Europe, and no less than 124,000 vaccinated and revaccinated citizens were carried off. They died of the illness. This roused Prussia. Sorry, I said Persia. Prussia. This roused Prussia, and she began to look about her. She brought good water into her cities, introduced a complete drainage system, got rid of her rookeries, and had model barracks built for her soldiers, and away fled smallpox. Sanitation did for Prussia what 35 years of compulsory vaccination was unable to accomplish. Smallpox is a filth disease. By getting rid of the filth, we get rid of the disease. It is recognized that improved sanitation has greatly reduced the death rate of consumption, typhoid fever, yellow fever, diphtheria, and the plague. So what are we dealing with? 1906, this is Dr. Heald in the magazine Life and Health, As Others See Us is the article title. It says, now there are two classes of people whom we would not take the time to argue with, the flat earth people and the anti-vaccinationists. There is a difference, however, between the two. The anti-vaccinationists have some truth on their side. Vaccination does harm, as many bereaved and sickened and stricken family can testify. We can grant that vaccination is a filthy practice. We can admit that young lives are sometimes snuffed out by vaccination. We know there is more or less danger connected with the process, but we cannot shut our eyes to the fact that many lives have undoubtedly been saved this way. We hope to find a safer method of preventing smallpox. And then we go on to 1915. This is Dr. Miller, Dr. H.W. Miller. And he says in 1915, anyone who depends upon careful diet, healthful surroundings, plenty of exercise, and general hygienic precautions for protection, and at the same time neglects vaccination against smallpox is taking a tremendous risk. Man, that sounds like completely the opposite of the 1860s and a lot of Kellogg's positions as well. There is very little we are more sure of concerning the prophylaxis and rational treatment of disease. There's very little that we are more sure of concerning the rational treatment of disease and prevention of disease than the use of vaccination in typhoid fever and smallpox. And there need no longer be hesitation or delay in making use of this safeguard. Oh, interesting. Interesting how things have changed from the 1860s to 1915 in the history of Adventist publications. So we see an evolution of thought patterns regarding vaccines in the Adventist Church. Early sentiments focused on hygienic living, avoidance of vaccination, and absolute disagreement with mandatory vaccinations. Later sentiments acknowledge that vaccines can be helpful in certain circumstances where people are not living hygienically, and there remained absolute disagreement with mandatory vaccinations. And then from the early 1900s, vaccine acceptance and then vaccine promotion gained ground, and after 1915, vaccine promotion eventually became the normative position of Adventist physicians, and therefore then later most members. So does this represent a movement in the right direction because of advancing technology and sophistication, or does this represent a movement in the wrong direction because of backsliding? You got to answer for yourself. Right? The evolutionary mindset sees the movements of human advancement, technological advancement, industrial advancement, medical advancement, and so on as a good movement away from caveman existence. The creation mindset sees the movements of human advancement as bad movements away from the Garden of Eden, which was the ideal of human existence. So is our advancement in medicine bringing us closer to the Garden of Eden or farther from it? Are we getting closer? Or are we going farther away? That does not mean that every advancement and every technological invention and so on is bad. No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. But the general trend of the movement, is it towards the garden or is it away from the garden? Okay. So in Ellen White's day, vaccines were present. And in her day, there was controversy between the church and the world and between different members of the church regarding the position on one should take towards vaccination. So, Let's clear up the matter. What did Ellen White have to say about vaccinations in order to clear up this controversy? Get your pictures ready. Here's the quote. She had absolutely nothing to say about vaccination. It's not listed anywhere. It's not dealt with anywhere. It's not at all. But, there are several individuals that have commented on her position on vaccination, even though there's nothing written by her on the topic. So she was explicit that what she wrote was inspired of God, but she stated that her life was not anyone's example. Christ's life was people's example. We read here, "In these letters which I write, in the testimonies I bear, I am presenting you that which the Lord has presented to me. I do not write one article in the paper expressing merely my own ideas. They are what God has opened before me in vision, the precious rays of light shining from the throne. It is true concerning the articles of our papers and in the many volumes of my books. I have been instructed in accordance with the word in the precepts of the law of God. I have been instructed in selecting from the lessons of Christ. Are not the positions taken in my writings in harmony with the teachings of Jesus Christ? But," she said, "I make myself a criterion for no one else." And then she says, "You may be assured that there will always be unconsecrated persons who will talk. On the steamer on the way over, I was one night instructed that my brethren and sisters have reported many things which it was said I had said, and this had brought sorrow to others." Hearsay, right? "I was also instructed that some would seek to have private interviews with me to catch something out of my lips which they could interpret to vindicate themselves and report. My instructor said, 'Silence is eloquence, even when before your supposed friends.' You will be justified in keeping your words for public occasions. Much more was said, which sometime I will tell you." And then she goes on to say, "When anyone comes to you saying, 'Sister White says this and Sister White says that,' make not a word of reply to them. You need not believe the reports." What can you take? What she said, what she wrote. That you can take. So let's look at D.E. Robinson, and his. There are a few reports that he has in regards to what Ellen White's positions were on vaccination. This is 1915. This is while Ellen White is still alive. Right? This is while she's still alive. He says, "I mentioned the matter," referring to vaccination to her, to Ellen White, one day, "but was unable to get anything definitive. Sister White's writings contain the broad principles that should guide us in all our work." So if you want to know what the principles are, go to her writings that are there, right? When it comes to the details, however, it is necessary for us to study these and to come to our own conclusions. Owing to our finite limitations, we do not always see alike on some of these matters. Not being a medical man, I would not want to give a very decided opinion. However, I'm going to give an opinion. The principle underlying the administration of antitoxins seems to be based upon scientific common sense. Now, science doesn't appear to have common sense. It's monkeying around with evolution and so on. Of course, it may be carried to extremes. We certainly should not trust to any of these remedies, which may be good in themselves, to the exclusion of such simple treatments as is outlined in the instructions given to us as a people. Of course, you will understand that this is only my personal sentiment or statement, for which Sister White is of no way responsible. Right? So that's 1915. Let's move on to 1924. Now Ellen White has been dead for 9 years, and this is Willie White. A letter written by Mrs. White's son on February 5, this actually comes from a book by Pernich. It says, a letter written by Mrs. White's son on February 5, 1924, discussing vaccination is interesting, to say the least. Similar to Robinson, he admits I do not remember of her ever saying or writing that she had special instruction regarding vaccination. Willie White explains that his mother regarded vaccination as a perplexing question. And it was a perplexing question. And he admits that in his earlier days, his mother spoke of vaccination as something dangerous because it much impaired his health. He was a vaccine-injured child. And he tells of how his mother listened attentively to the argument that the methods of vaccination had been improved. He tells of an incident wherein just before entering a large city where smallpox was raging, certain physicians urged his mother and her associates to receive vaccination. While Willie White does not say whether Mrs. White was vaccinated herself, he mentions that after she was persuaded by the physicians, she offered no objection to her son and his associates receiving vaccination. Okay. And now, on to the famous D.E. Robinson quote in 1931. You asked for definite and concise information regarding what Sister White wrote about vaccination and serum. This question can be answered very briefly, for so far as we have any record, she did not refer to them in any of her writings. It'd be so nice if there was a period right there. Reply. But he goes on. You will be interested to know, however, that at a time when there was an epidemic of smallpox in the vicinity, she herself was vaccinated. Oh, hang on. Willie, her son, who was with her, wasn't even sure that she was vaccinated. Right. So you will be interested to know, however, that at a time when there was an epidemic of smallpox in the vicinity, she herself was vaccinated and urged her helpers, those connected with her, to be vaccinated. In taking this step, Sister White recognized the fact that it has been proven that vaccination either renders one immune from smallpox or greatly lightens its effects if one does come down with it. She also recognized the danger of their exposing others if they failed to take this precaution. I'm sorry, but do you find any of that in her writings? No. This is D.E. Robinson commentary on what he thinks relative to the issue. And there is one more commentator, that is Arthur White, Ellen White's grandson. And in 1955, he writes this: You have asked specifically concerning her relationship to vaccination. I am not absolutely certain whether Ellen G. White was vaccinated or not. Right? I'm not certain. We do know that she was present in an area where there was an outbreak of smallpox and the members of her office staff were vaccinated, and it runs in the mind of Elder Robinson, who was there at the time, that Sister White herself was also vaccinated. So he admits that this runs in Robinson's mind. And then, that was 1955. What about 1961? In 1961, he writes to someone else, Sister White has not written one word against inoculations or vaccinations. The facts are that she herself was vaccinated. Oh, hang on, 1955. I'm not absolutely certain whether Ellen White was vaccinated or not. 1961, the facts are that she herself was vaccinated. So apparently some light came to Arthur White between 1955 and 1961 to convince him that she was. Or was she? I don't know. During a smallpox epidemic, members of her family and her office staff were also vaccinated. She recognized the useful service which was performed in building up the resistance in the body to certain diseases. If someone has informed you as Sister White counseled against vaccinations or inoculations, they are mistaken. That statement is correct. She did not counsel against it. But neither did she counsel for it. She didn't say anything about it. Anything. So if she had nothing to say about vaccination, what did she say about infectious diseases and how to treat them? Let's then look at that and see what is written, what is advocated, right? What did she have to say about their causes and their cures? Again, there may be somebody sick there. You want to know how to use the common methods, the simple remedies of water. It is a simple power. Although my husband and I were not physicians, yet we were. We could go around when the doctor's children were cut down, 4 and 5 in the families of physicians. We never lost a case. That is, in diphtheria. And we used only the simple treatments. In doing this, we gained the confidence of the physicians. When persons would go to the physician for help, they would say, if anybody can help you, it is up there at Elder White's. He and his wife go around and help people. I don't know how they do it. It may be that God will send you to some such homes where help is needed for the sick. You can melt your way into the hearts of the worst souls and they be converted. What did she use? The simple remedies. Right? The evidence you have that the blessing of God attends faithful efforts made to restore the sick by those having limited facilities are the very same that we had years ago in Battle Creek. You don't have a lot to work with, it doesn't matter. He can still work. Before our sanitarium there was established, my husband and I went from house to house to give treatment. Under God's blessing, we saved the lives of many who were suffering from attacks of diphtheria and bloody dysentery. Even physicians were burying their own children. Instruction was given to me by the Lord in regard to the kind of treatment I should give, and we had success. And what kind of treatment was that? It was natural, it was simple, water, and so on. So in those days, diphtheria antitoxin was available. It was a treatment option, but nothing is mentioned about it in the Spirit of Prophecy. So what did she have to say about using other drugs to treat these kinds of conditions? The old regular practice has been exalted as the only true method of the for the treatment of disease. And we'll have a little bit more to say about that in a minute. And to a large degree, this feeling has leavened the physicians. They have resorted to drugs in cases of fever to break it up, as they have thought. This method has broken up fevers and other diseases, right? So the drugs did work. They did break up the fevers, and they did break up other diseases. But in some cases, it has broken up the whole man with it. That not still the case? Do we not have over 100,000 deaths every year in the United States because of properly used medication? Yeah, it still happens. The Lord has been pleased to present this matter before me in clear lines. Fever cases need not be treated with drugs. The most difficult cases are best and most successfully managed by nature's own resources. This science, fully adopted, will bring the best results if the practitioner will be thorough. The Lord will bless the physician who depends on natural methods, helping every function of the human machinery to act in its own strength, the part the Lord designed it to act, and restoring itself to proper action. So the treatment one should give is something that takes proper physiology and supports proper physiology so that that which God created for restoration can be supported in its restoration. So what about the allopathic method? Well, what is allopathy? Anybody know? All right, well, in her day, you had homeopathy. You had allopathic medicine. You had osteopathy. You had eclectic. There were several, you had chiropractic. All of these were alive and well in Ellen White's day. Homeopathic means that you take something that creates the same symptoms that you have in order to get you over the thing that you have. Allopathy means that you take something that's opposite to what you have in order to try to get rid of it. Osteopathy, it looked at including spinal manipulation and other things like that, like chiropractic does as well, in addition to more natural remedies, but also the inclusion of surgery and so on and so forth. And eclectic basically was eclectic. It took pieces of stuff from here, there, and tried to pull the best of it all together. Right? So there were multiple different types of physicians, types of doctors that were trained in various different types of schools in her day. So what did she have to say about it? This is a letter to Dr. Kellogg. She says, "You, Dr. Kellogg, have caused the light of God that God has given to you to shine forth to others, and this light has influenced others to labor in the different lines of the medical work." That's good. "But according to the light the Lord has given me, something of the spirit of Freemasonry exists and has built a wall around the work." Interesting. "The old regular practice," that's allopathic medicine, that's the old regular practice, "has been exalted as the only true method for the treatment of disease." Are we not there now? Are we not still there? Still there, right? "And to a large degree, this feeling has leavened the physicians connected with you. Dr. Kellogg, God has given you favor with the medical fraternity, and He would have you hold that favor. But in no case are you to stand as do the physicians of the world to exalt allopathy above every other practice and call all other methods quackery and error. For from the beginning to the present time, the results of allopathy have made a most objectionable showing. There has been loss of life in your sanitarium because drugs have been administered, and these give no chance for nature to do her work of restoration. Drug medication has broken up the power of the human machinery, and the patients have died. Others have carried the drugs away with them, making less effective the simple remedies nature uses to restore the system. The students in your institution, Battle Creek Sanitarium, are not to be educated to regard drugs as a necessity. They are to be educated to leave drugs alone." The medical fraternity represented to me as Freemasonry with their long, unintelligible names which common people cannot understand. The medical fraternity would call the Lord's prescription for Hezekiah quackery. Death was pronounced upon the king, and it was what? What did he have? Nope. He had a boil. Hezekiah was dying from a boil. He had an abscess. Abscess is what? An infection. Right? So, Hezekiah, the death was pronounced upon the king, but he prayed for life, and his prayer was heard. Those who had the care of him were told to get a bunch of figs and put them on the sore, and the king was restored. This means was taken by God to teach them that all their preparations were only depriving the king of the power to rally and overcome disease. He was not going untreated. He was going treated, and they were giving him everything they knew to give him, all of their preparations. While they pursued their course of treatment, his life could not be saved. The Lord diverted their minds from their wonderful mysteries to a simple remedy of nature. There are lessons for us all in these directions. Young men who are sent to Ann Arbor, the medical school, to obtain an education which they think will exalt them as supreme in their treatment of disease by drugs will find that it will result in the loss of life rather than restoration to health and strength. These mixtures place a double taxation upon nature, and in the effort to throw off the poisons they contain, thousands of persons lose their lives. We must leave drugs entirely alone, for in using them we introduce an enemy into the system. I write this because we have to meet this drug medication in the physicians in this country, and we do not want this practice, as in Battle Creek, to steal into our midst as a thief. She's saying that it was stealing into the midst of Battle Creek. We want the door closed against the enemy before the lives of human beings are imperiled. And next, I'm going to read you I thought I'd read everything on this before, and I found a letter written to Merritt Kellogg. And it's just, I don't know, I just can't, let me read it. Read it with me. I was disappointed that Sister Green was not sent for to go to the health retreat. I saw when you and she were conversing that you talked just as all the physicians talk who have received their education from Battle Creek and Ann Arbor. All who have received this education talk the same. Dr. John Kellogg has said to us frequently, send us young men to learn to become doctors and we will do the best we can for them. But these men come out fully fledged allopathists and deeply set against any other manner of practice. Is that not the same today? Do we not come out of medical school skeptics of anything else? I tell you, I did. I did. Now, my brother, I cannot harmonize this manner of treating the question with the light of the Lord has been pleased to give to me. I have been shown. What does that tell you? Not an opinion statement, right? I have been shown that there has been a large number of deaths and a greater number of sufferers left upon the earth to drag out a miserable existence under the allopathy practice than under the other methods of treating disease. But, like Sunday keeping, its age and name has stood as the only true scientific method of treating disease. I wish to say that God has shown me that wrong principles are brought in here and acted upon. I know that it is regarded as the only sound method and everything else is ridiculed and demerited, but this is not my way of regarding the matter by any means. I actually think that you would have done just as well if you had not seen Battle Creek. I am sure that this giving so largely of medicine is not in accordance with the light God has given me, and I have stated this many times. There ought to be far less drugs used, and all who practice as physicians who have received their diplomas from the allopathy institutions do not receive at the same time the right mold after God's order. There is altogether too much strong medicine used. I have been shown that there needed to be a thorough reformation in this matter in the sanitarium at Battle Creek, that lasting harm has been done some who have had medicine dealt out of them. And she didn't say all, but some. Dr. Kellogg has more discretion and caution and takes more candid views of the methods of using drugs than his associates. But these associates have received the strong prejudice against methods of using medicines not after the allopathy order, which places them in their practice where they need reforming. They need a decided change in their views in regard to giving medicine. It is in view of the light of the Lord has given me that I have not felt clear to work out Dr. Gibbs and let another physician of the allopathy school take his place. Dr. Gibbs was an eclectic. He was an eclectic physician. So she's saying, I have not felt it clear to get Dr. Gibbs out and let somebody else take his place. For I could not feel that it was the right thing to do to make a what? An idol of this one line allopathy, because that is established as the most popular. A what of that one line? An idol. I feel just the same concerning this matter as I have ever felt. Give us good, conscientious working men and women upon hygienic principles and put out the drugs. In accordance with the light God has given me, we must never cease reforming. My brother, the Lord would have us be right because it is right. I have no special anxiety to establish any kind of apathy in dealing with drugs. Let them alone. They have killed far more than they have saved life. I know what I am talking about, for this matter has been laid open before me, and I am most thoroughly distressed over it and over the prejudice existing in regard to the practice of the old pathy, of one pathy over the of another. For all this drugging business is not after God's order. The very least particle that shall be introduced into the system, the better for the one who is being treated. The many, many wrecks made through administering strong medicine have been traced from cause to effect by the infinite power, by an infinite power, and the picture presented before me in its true light I shall never forget. My spirit is stirred within me when I see the efforts made, even among our people, by professional men to cry down and demerit every medical practice in the treatment of disease except the one method of allopathy, which they have learned. I will not fall into line with this thing. But I will say in the name of the Lord, let the drugs fall into disuse and practice upon hygienic principles. It is not in God's order to educate the people to depend upon drug medication. Physicians who believe present truth need to make advanced moves in reform. I didn't say it. She said it. Got a problem? Take it up with her. So what did she understand was the cause of these infectious diseases? What was the cause? Well, interestingly enough, she got sick in San Francisco. She said the ventilation in the San Francisco church is not good. And after my return home, I suffered from the effects of breathing the impure air. The influenza was upon me. Right? So she was in a poorly ventilated space. And she attributed it to impure air. She also mentioned, Adventist Home, page 22, a neglect of cleanliness will induce disease. Sickness does not come without a cause. Violent epidemics of fevers have occurred in villages and cities that were considered perfectly healthful, and these have resulted in death or broken constitutions. In many instances, the premises of the very ones who fell victims to these epidemics contained the agents of destruction which sent forth deadly poison into the atmosphere to be inhaled by the family and the neighborhood. It is astonishing to witness the prevailing ignorance relative to the effects which slackness and recklessness produce upon health by not keeping things clean. Right? Now, where did this virus supposedly come from? Yeah. China, Wuhan. Yeah. Well, it was a market. There was a virology lab that was near there, but general area. Are markets generally clean? Animal markets? No, not generally clean. So uncleanness has a factor. We feel that Satan is stirred from beneath to make all the confusion possible. Come home as soon as possible. We must depend solely on God in these perplexing times, she's writing to one of her family members. Or we will see only defeat and meet with mortification. God help us is my prayer. These days are most beautiful, sunshiny and balmy. It seems strange to have so much sickness. Is the very air we breathe infected with a plague because of sin? Very good questions. Is it because of sin? When I was at Hastings, New Zealand, Brother and Sister McAuliffe sent me a letter saying that their daughter was at the point of death and asking our prayers in their behalf. We did pray for the whole family, for all had been passing through a siege of diphtheria. That night, the true situation of the family was laid open before me. I wrote out many pages in regard to their mismanagement of their child. The light given me was not plain and was plain and decided. I did not send this testimony at the time. I wrote Brother and Sister McAuliffe a short letter in which I entreated them, for Christ's sake and their own sake, to seek the Lord and to confess to him their wrong course they had pursued toward their child. I then pleaded with God in their behalf. My soul was wrought up in an agony, and I thought that the child was dying and that even that little child had deceived and falsified. So it wasn't an issue of cleanliness, it was an issue of internal cleanliness. Or she was deceitful, she was falsifying. I begged the parents to seek God for themselves and for their child. I knew that it would be better for her to die now than to live to become what she surely would, unless the parents took the matter decidedly in hand. Sometimes death is not the worst outcome. God has not restrained the powers of darkness from carrying forward their deadly work of vitiating the air, one of the sources of life and nutrition, with a deadly miasma. Oh, who's working this out? Where's this coming from? The powers of darkness. He's not restrained them. So yes, ultimately God is in control, right? But he's allowing them to do this work. Not only is vegetable life affected, but man suffers from pestilences. Cholera and unexplainable diseases have broken out. Diphtheria, raging to a limited extent, is gathering its harvest of precious little ones and seems to be almost uncontrollable. These things are the results of drops from the vials of God's wrath being sprinkled on the earth and are but faint representations of what will be in the future. So what do we do when we're surrounded by these things? Many have inquired of me, what course shall I take to best preserve my health? My answer is, cease to transgress. Transgress what? The laws of your being. Cease to gratify a depraved appetite. Eat simple food. Dress healthfully. Hardly ever do we think of health when we dress. Which will require modest simplicity. Work healthfully, and you will not be sick. Now, my husband attended meetings in New Hampshire and Maine. During his absence, I was much troubled, fearing he might take the cholera, which was then prevailing. But one night I dreamed that while many around us were dying with the cholera, my husband proposed that we should go take a walk. In our walk, I noticed that his eyes looked bloodshot, his countenance flushed, his lips pale. I told him that I feared that he would be an easy subject for the cholera. Said he, walk on a little farther, and I will show you a sure remedy for the cholera. As we walked on, we came to a bridge over a stream of water. Then he abruptly left me and plunged out of sight into the water. I was frightened. But he soon arose, holding in his hand a glass of sparkling water. He drank it, saying, this water cures all manner of diseases. He plunged in again out of sight, brought up another glass of clear water, and as he held it up, repeated the same words. I felt sad that he did not offer me some of the water. Said he, there is a secret spring at the bottom of this river which cures all manner of diseases, and all who obtain it must plunge at a venture. No one can obtain it for another. Each must plunge for himself. As he drank the glass of water, I looked at his countenance. His complexion was fair and natural. He seemed to possess health and vigor. When I awoke, all my fears were dispelled, and I trusted my husband to the care of a merciful God, fully believing that he would return him to me in safety. Yeah. Where was the safety? In God. Now, I do have personal thoughts on this issue. I do. And I'll start with a not thought from me. The will of God establishes the connection between cause and its effects. Fearful consequences are attached to the least violation of God's law. All will seek to avoid the result, but will not labor to avoid the cause which produced the effect. The cause is wrong, the effect right. So effects are never wrong. They're never wrong. They're always right because every effect is assigned by God. Every effect is assigned by God, and he knows exactly how to assign the effect to the cause. So the effect is never wrong. The effect is always right. If it's a bad cause, it's going to have a bad effect. If it's a good cause, it's going to have a good effect, so that you can know the difference between the cause. But the effect is always right. It is the cause that can be right or wrong, not the effect. And if the cause is right, then the effect will reveal that there is a right cause. And if the cause is wrong, then the effect will reveal that there was a wrong cause. And symptoms and diseases are effects. They are always right. Symptoms and diseases are effects. They are always right. They are never wrong. They are assigned or permitted by God. Symptoms and disease reveal that there is a cause present and that cause is wrong. Right? To have a fever is not wrong. It is always right, for the fever is the effect, right? But you only have a fever when something is wrong. You never have a fever when everything is right. So it's not the fever that is wrong, but it is the thing that triggers the fever that is wrong. Does it make sense? Right? So a fever is the result of a functional law of your system being violated, and is an attempt to overcome that violation and return to harmony again with that law. That's what your symptoms are about. And if you introduce something into your body and fever is the response, what can you conclude about what was put into your body? I want to let this one settle and simmer a little bit. Right? Let that one settle in a little bit. Fever is not wrong. It's the thing that triggers the fever that's wrong. Fever shows you that a functional law has been violated, and it's the attempt to get you back into harmony with that law. So if you put something into your body, and the result of putting that thing into your body is a fever, then what was that was put into your body? Was it good or was it not? Was it right or was it wrong? It was wrong. The effect, the fever, which is always right, shows that the cause was wrong. This is true of any symptom or disease, not just fever. It's true of any of them. We're told in Ministry of Healing, page 127, disease is an effort of nature to free the system from conditions that result from a violation of the laws of health. So what must we conclude then about any chemical that is introduced into the system that results in fever, chills, aches, headache, upset stomach, or any of those other things? The symptoms and the diseases, the effects, which are always right, clearly show that the chemical introduced was wrong. If a vaccination or a vaccine is injected into the system and the result is fever or chills or body aches or headache or upset stomach or any other symptom, set of symptoms, condition, or disease, was the vaccine right or was it wrong? We're told that all tares are sown by the evil one. Every noxious herb is of his sowing. There are bad herbs out there. There's been over $2 billion in taxes brought in by their growing now in many places. Every noxious herb is of his sowing, and by his ingenious methods of amalgamation he has corrupted the earth with tares. Then shall physicians continue to resort to drugs, which leave a deadly evil in the system, destroying that life which Christ came to restore? Christ's remedies cleanse the system. But Satan has tempted man to introduce into the system that which weakens the human machinery, clogging and destroying the fine, beautiful arrangements of God. The drugs administered to the sick do not restore, but destroy. Drugs never cure. Let me say that again. Drugs never cure. Instead, they place in the system seeds which bear a very bitter harvest. Does a seed produce a harvest right away? Not usually. But sometimes we do see immediate results. But you know what I'm waiting for? I'm waiting for the harvest to come later. We've already seen bad happen. But I'm waiting for the seeds to sprout and to grow and to produce a harvest later. No doubt it'll be attributed to other things, like climate change. But nonetheless, drugs never cure disease. They only change the form and location. So you might have been dealing with one thing, you take the medication, that thing is you're no longer dealing with it, but now you start dealing with something else. You had arthritis, and so you took pain medication, but now you've got gastritis. You took cholesterol medication, and now you've got breaking down muscle and dementia. You got this problem and you take this, but then this is the result of it. And it's not everyone, but it's enough. Nature alone is the effectual restorer, and how much better could she perform her task if left to herself? Christ came into our world to seek and to save that which was lost. His work as the one who heals all manner of diseases is unequaled. There are those whom the Lord uses as his co-laborers in the medical missionary work. These he is seeking to illuminate that they may receive light and knowledge to communicate to others, and thus brighten the dark pathway of those who are oppressed by suffering and disease. If the sufferers would only come in faith to the divine healer, they would see of the salvation of God. But instead of cooperating with the mighty healer by using the very means he has provided, by educating themselves to use water and fresh air, and to avoid all cleanness of premises and person, they turn to physicians who are in no way connected with the Lord Jesus and take their prescriptions of drug medications. These leave their poisonous trail behind, implanting in the system seeds of suffering and death. Why do they not inquire of God? Why not? Why do they not seek help from the one who so loved them that he gave his only begotten Son to save all who would believe on him? Is he not just as well able now to heal disease as when he walked in humanity upon the earth? Where is our faith when we turn to every conceivable resource but the one who declares that he came to the world to do the special work of healing the sick? Holding pattern, click, click, click. Why are not all who accept Christ so illuminated that they can irradiate others and lift them from groveling in intemperance of all kinds, leading them to let drugs alone? Why do we not come to Jesus in faith? Many give him a casual touch, coming in contact with him only with his person. The woman, the one with the 12 years of bleeding, did more than this. She put forth her hand in faith and was healed instantly. The Lord will heal those who believe, but he has given natural blessings for the benefit of the afflicted, and he would have these used. God could have healed Hezekiah with a word, but he heard Hezekiah's prayer and gave direction that a bunch of figs be placed upon the diseased parts. This was done, and Hezekiah recovered. But his recovery, this is very interesting. I never remembered reading this before. His recovery was not instantaneous. Why? He had not the same faith that the afflicted woman had. Interesting. We need to exercise faith. To practice the use of drug medication does not harmonize with faith. Should I say that again? I'm just going to get myself in more trouble. To practice the use of drug medication does not harmonize with faith. Appealing to worldly physicians is dishonoring to God. Those who come to God in faith must cooperate with him in accepting and using his heaven-sent remedies: water, sunlight, and plenty of air. It is of no use to have seasons of prayer for the sick while they refuse to use the simple remedies which God has provided and which are close by them. If there is an unsanitary condition of things in the house and about the premises, the very first thing is to take up the work that has been neglected and cleanse and purify the house and premises, making everything sweet, that the atmosphere may not be tainted by the least offensive smell. The Lord gave certain directions to the children of Israel. They were to gather at the base of Mount Sinai to hear the voice of God speaking the 10 Commandments, but first they were to wash their clothes. Again, he commanded that no uncleanness should be tolerated in the encampment, lest the Lord should pass by and see their uncleanness, and because of this refuse to go up with their armies to battle. Some people ask God to preserve their families from all sickness and disease, while uncleanness and untidiness are seen in the home, with the very things that create disease. Can God glorify his name by working a miracle to prevent the plague coming nigh the dwelling of those who do not care to act a part to prevent malaria and fevers? The Lord does not work in this way. The human agent must act his part intelligently, keeping his body and his clothing clean and every room in the house in order. Then the Lord can approach his dwelling. I will be honored, saith the Lord, by them that approach unto me. All who claim to love and serve God have a duty to perform. They are to keep themselves from all filthiness of the flesh and of the spirit, and perfect holiness in the fear of the Lord. It is the failure to do these things that makes the religion of those who profess to be Christians vain. Our God is too pure and holy to tolerate any disorder, any uncleanness. Ignorance in regard to these things is sin. And lesson number 12, one of the best protections is cleanliness. You want to know how to protect yourself in this stuff and other things that are coming in the future? It's cleanliness. A neglect of cleanliness will induce disease. Sickness does not come without a cause. Violent epidemics and fevers have occurred in villages and cities that were considered perfectly healthful, and these have resulted in death and broken constitutions. In many instances, the premises of the very ones who fell victims to these epidemics contain the agents of destruction which sent forth deadly poison in the atmosphere, to be inhaled by the family and the neighborhood. It is astonishing to witness the prevailing ignorance relative to the effects which sickness and recklessness produce upon health. Right? We read that already, but we want to put it in context here, under cleanliness. If God was so particular to enjoin cleanliness upon those journeying in the wilderness, who were in the open air nearly all the time, he requires no less of us who live in sealed houses, where impurities are more observable and have a more unhealthful influence. Every form of uncleanness tends to disease. Death-producing germs abound in dark, neglected corners, and decaying refuse, and dampness, and mold, and must. See, obviously, she's talking about microorganisms, right? No waste vegetables or heaps of fallen leaves should be allowed to remain near the house to decay and poison the air. Nothing unclean or decaying should be tolerated within the home. In towns or cities regarded perfectly healthful, many an epidemic of fever has been traced to decaying matter about the dwelling of some careless householder. Perfect cleanliness, plenty of sunlight, careful attention to sanitation, and every detail of the home life are essential to freedom from disease and to the cheerfulness and vigor of the inmates in the home. So when she says about germs, what is she talking about? Well, when you look up Google and you type in germ, the definitions from Oxford Languages says it's a microorganism, especially one that causes disease. Or 2, a portion of an organism capable of developing into a new one or a part of one. But in Ellen White's day, Noah Webster's 1828 American Dictionary, what did germ mean? Germ, it was a noun from the Latin germum. In botany, the ovary or seed bud of a plant, the rudiment of fruit, yet in embryo, is the base or lower part of the pistil, which in the progress of vegetation swells and becomes the seed vessel. Now, was this what she was talking about? No. There's another definition. It means origin. Germ means origin, or first principle, that from which anything springs, as the germ of civil liberty or of prosperity. So when she's using the term germ, she's not thinking microorganism. She's thinking the origination of the thing comes from the decaying matter. Now, sure, there might be microorganisms there, But it's not necessarily microorganisms that she's referring to. But is cleanliness going to help with the microorganisms? Well, apparently so. Apparently so. Scrupulous cleanliness is essential to both physical and mental health. Impurities are constantly thrown off from the body through the skin. Its millions of pores are quickly clogged unless kept clean by frequent bathing. And the impurities which should pass off through the skin become an additional burden to the other eliminating organs. One of the most prolific sources of disease is the transgression of the laws of life in regard to personal habits. Order and cleanliness are laws of heaven. The directions given to Moses when the Lord was about to declare his law on Mount Sinai were very strict in this respect. And the Lord said unto Moses, Go unto the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes. They were directed to do this, lest there should be impurity about them as they should come before him. He is a God of order, and he requires order and cleanliness in his people. You see, it is not just about microorganisms, it's about order. About cleanliness. To even have a clean, cluttered home does not fit the bill. Right? The children of Israel were in no case to allow any impurities to remain upon their clothing or upon themselves. Those who had any personal uncleanness were to be shut out of the camp until the evening, and then were required to cleanse themselves and their clothing before they could return. They were also commanded to carry all their refuse to a great distance from the camp. And this was a sanitary measure as well as a religious regulation. The Lord requires no less of his people now than he did anciently. A neglect of cleanliness will induce disease. Sickness does not come without a cause. Quite interesting. When Lord Palmerston, Premier of England, was petitioned by the Scottish clergy to appoint a day of fasting and prayer to avert the cholera, he replied, Cleanse and disinfect your streets and houses. Promote cleanliness and health among the poor, and see that they are plentifully supplied with good food and raiment, and employ right sanitary measures generally, and you will have no occasion to fast and pray. Nor will the Lord hear your prayers while these his preventives remain unheeded. Yeah. Teach the little ones that God is not pleased to see them with unclean bodies and untidy, torn garments. Having the clothing neat and clean will be one means of keeping the thoughts pure and sweet. There's a connection between your physical cleanness and your thoughts. Especially should every article which comes in contact with the skin be kept clean. Truth never places her delicate feet in the path of uncleanness or impurity. He who was so particular that the children of Israel should cherish habits of cleanliness will not sanction any impurity in the homes of his people today. God looks with disfavor on uncleanliness of any kind. So we've heard a lot about outward purity, bathing and washing clothes, making sure nothing is decaying or molding in the area, proper waste disposal, order and neatness, sunshine, and so on. But what about cleanliness within? Unclean, neglected corners in the house will tend to make impure, neglected corners in the soul. There's an effect there, cause and effect. Heaven is pure and holy, and those who pass through the gates of the city of God must be clothed with inward and outward purity. God's remedies are the simple agencies of nature that will not tax or debilitate the system through their powerful properties. Pure air and water, cleanliness and proper diet, purity of life, and a firm trust in God are remedies for the want of which thousands are dying. Yet these remedies are going out of date because their skillful use requires work that the people do not appreciate. Fresh air, exercise, pure water, and clean, sweet premises are within the reach of all with but little expense. Life in the open air is good for body and mind. It is God's medicine for the restoration of health. Pure air, good water, sunshine, beautiful surroundings of nature, these are his means for restoring the sick to health in natural ways. Oh, but don't dare go outside. Better distance inside. Lock the doors. Wear a mask while you're inside. I can't tell you how many times I passed somebody in their vehicle, the windows rolled up. And I look at it and I just, okay, you got freedom to do it. Pure air. What kind of air? Pure air. Good water, sunshine, beautiful surroundings of nature. These are his means of restoring the sick to health in natural ways. To the sick, it is worth more than silver and gold to lie in the sunshine or in the shade of the trees. You get sick, go outside. Spend time out in his nature. The only safe course is to touch not, taste not, handle not tea, coffee, wines, tobacco, opium, and other alcoholic drinks. Right? Those are going to mess it up, mess up the system. Don't put it in there. That will cause internal uncleanness, right? The influence of the Spirit of God, is the very best medicine for disease. What is?
Spirit of God.
Yeah, the influence of the Spirit of God, the very best medicine for disease. Heaven is all health, and the more deeply heavenly influences are realized, the more sure will be the recovery of the believing invalid. The consciousness of right doing is the best medicine for diseased bodies and minds. The special blessing of God resting upon the receiver is health and strength. A person whose mind is quiet and satisfied in God is in the pathway to health. This is all part of the healing process of having things right between us and God, but having things right between us and each other. Right? As the sick are brought into touch with the life giver, their faculties of mind and body will be renewed. But in order to do this, for this to be, they must practice self-denial and be temperate in all things. Thus only can they be saved from physical and spiritual death and restored to health. The relation that exists between the mind and the body is very intimate. When one is affected, the other sympathizes. The condition of the mind affects the health of the physical system. If the mind is free and happy. If the mind is what? Free and happy. From a consciousness of right doing and a sense of satisfaction in causing happiness to others. How can you have a consciousness of causing happiness to others if you hide yourself from them? And you won't interact with them because you're afraid of them. Can you be really clean inside if we hide ourselves from our own flesh? No. If the mind is free and happy from the consciousness of right doing and a sense of satisfaction in causing happiness to others, it creates a cheerfulness that will react upon the whole system, causing a freer circulation of blood, a toning up of the entire body. The blessing of God is a healing power, and those who are abundant in benefiting others will realize that wondrous blessing in both heart and life. You want to protect yourself against disease? Got a device? Got a Bible on that device? Let's go to Isaiah. Isaiah, which chapter? Somebody going to anticipate for me? Isaiah 58. Thank you. Let's go to Isaiah 58. Isaiah 58. Cry aloud, spare not, lift up their voice like a trumpet, and show my people their transgression and the house of Jacob their sins. Yet they seek me daily and delight to know my ways, as a nation that did righteousness and forsook not the ordinance of their God. They ask of me ordinances of justice. They take delight in approaching to God. Oh, we love coming to church and praying and worshiping and doing all of that kind of stuff and asking him for good things. Wherefore have we fasted, say they, and thou seest not? Wherefore have we afflicted our soul, and thou takest no knowledge? Right? Why are you not answering in this time? Behold, in the day of your fast ye find pleasure and exact all your laborers. Behold, ye fast for strife and debate, and smite with the fist of wickedness. Ye shall not fast as ye do this day, to make your voice to be heard on high. Is it such a fast that I have chosen, a day for a man to afflict his soul? Is it to bow down his head as a bulrush, and to spread sackcloth and ashes under him? Wilt thou call this a fast, an acceptable day of the Lord? Is not this the fast I have chosen, to loose the bands of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, and to let the oppressed go free, and that ye break every yoke? Are we not being bound down by yokes these days? We are. And we're imposing the yokes on each other. But what is the fast that the Lord desires? That you let the oppressed go free and break every yoke. Is it not to deal thy bread to the hungry, and that thou bring the poor that are cast out to thy house? When thou seest the naked, that thou cover him, and that thou hide not thyself from thine own flesh? Have we been hiding ourselves from our own flesh? Yes. Then shall thy light break forth as the morning, and thine health shall spring forth speedily. And thy righteousness shall go before thee, the glory of the Lord shall be thy reward. Then shalt thou call, and the Lord shall answer. Thou shalt cry, and he shall say, Here am I. If thou take away from the midst of thee the yoke, the putting forth of the finger, of speaking of vanity, if thou draw out thy soul to the hungry, and satisfy the afflicted soul, then shall thy light rise in obscurity, and thy darkness be as the noonday. And the Lord shall guide thee continually, and satisfy thy soul in drought, and make fat thy bones, and thou shalt be like a watered garden, and like a spring of water whose waters fail not. This is the prescription for health. This is the prescription that we need. And we can pray and cry to God all we want to, but if we don't comply with the conditions upon which the promise is granted, it will not be granted. We must find the hungry. We must find the imprisoned. We must find those who are worse off than ourselves, and not hide ourselves from our flesh, and reach out and minister to their needs, even if it might kill us. And in doing so, His light will shine, and His health will come forth speedily. My time is done. The series is not, but the time is. And so I must pray and close. But all of it will be on the DVD series, so if you signed up and your name is on there, then you'll get the information when it's available. And then we'll have the last bit of it on there as well. Yeah, the question is, will there be a syllabus? Probably sometime in the future when I have time to actually do something of that nature, yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure about immediately. There's a lot of stuff that we're doing now. As I mentioned before, the family is going to be leaving Uchi. We are going to be starting a new family ministry called New Paradigm Ministries. And yeah, and the question is where, and the answer to that is it's still up in the air right now. So we're not sure exactly where we're going to land. But there are a lot of plans for putting stuff together as far as materials and resources, apps, book, other things like that, so that there's more resources that people can have access to, even though we might not be able to be in direct presence of individuals. So keep that in prayer. It's been a pleasure. I thank you for your kindness. I came into this series trembling because I knew it could go really bad. Yeah, it could go really bad. And, I praise the Lord for His Holy Spirit, and I just pray that we see a different perspective, and based on that perspective, make decisions, according to the law and the testimony, according to the word of God and the spirit of prophecy, and that we might stand in these last days.
Amen.
Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, what an awesome God you are. We thank you that you are. And Lord, we thank you that you are the God of truth and that you help to open our eyes. And Lord, as you open our eyes, help us to see the beauty and the glory of what you have designed for us. And may we walk in your way, regardless of what impediments may seem to be there. May we walk in the truth, live in the truth, and go free in the truth, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.